Welcome back to another episode of Big Moves, Bigger Conversations. Today's conversation is all around negotiations. When is the last time you've negotiated? Right? I know a lot of you guys are thinking, oh, salary. Yeah, that's one. But like, you should be negotiating everything. And so that is the skill that I'm going to share with you guys today. So I know if you guys have been following this series, like you know that I was recently let go from my firm. And so what did I negotiate? My exit package. Now I gotta go about this a little bit differently, but which I'll get into. But my friend, she is also going through the process of, she was recently let go from her firm and they gave her like a 2-week severance package. She hadn't been with the firm for that long. And usually the industry standard across industries, the standard is pretty much for every year of service, you get 2 weeks of severance. I, in this current economy, would challenge that, especially if it isn't performance driven, right? So there's a ton of reasons you can be let go. It can be performance, it can be a redundancy in role, it can be like, hey, we're just restructuring, right? And so if any of those, to me, right? But another thing in negotiation is, try. Don't let me tell you no, let them tell you no before you tell yourself no. But to me, as long as it's not performance related, I would try to negotiate, and I would like use the industry standard as a baseline, but I wouldn't let that dictate what I'm actually asking for. So as an example, my friend, she's been with the company for a year. They just did some budget cuts and were like, hey, we're going to basically offboard and we're going to give you 2 weeks severance. 2 weeks is nothing. Like, think about it. You're on a 1 week lag. For most companies, when you're paid bi-weekly, you're like on a 1 week lag. So that's 2 checks. You can't plan for anything with 2 checks. Granted, you should never be living to the point where like 1 check makes a difference. But in the event you are, right, like 2 weeks is nothing. So I basically challenged her to go back and ask them. And I said, well, what would you want? And she was like, well, she started talking. And she was like, I would ask for this, but I'm not sure. I said, girl, you're carrying on. How many weeks of severance do you want? And she was like, 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, girl, add. Like, draft the email. I say all the time, Chat GPT has never steered me wrong. I will literally say what I want to say and then say, clean this up, make it grammatically correct, keep it in my tone of voice, and be clear that this is what I'm asking for because I rightfully deserve it, or whatever that statement is. And so she sent that email this morning. TBD on whether or not she'll get it. But like, also when you ask, make sure you're comfortable with whatever it might be with whatever they might come back with, right? So she's asking for 6 weeks, but are you really happy with 4? Yeah, because it's better than what? 2. And so be clear about that. Where I really negotiate is when it comes to my apartment. So I live in Atlanta. For those of you who are not familiar with Atlanta real estate right now, there are tons of new apartments like being thrown up, and everything is luxury. Everything is, concierge, the amenities, a pool, a common area. Like, the apartments are literally like the same, but there's so many of them. And so in Atlanta specifically, you have the opportunity to get concessions, and concessions are basically like a reduction in your rate, in the amount that you would pay for your rent. And so I am notorious for not only negotiating on the front end, but also when I'm resigning. And so I actually did this more recently where my lease was up. This is the second year I've been at this building and love the property. There are like small things that could change. Like, I hate the parking here. Parking here is so ridiculous that like, if you have a visitor, the visitor has to register, but the parking is on level 3. Registering your vehicle is on level 2. So the person can come in, go to level 2, but then they can't get to level 3 without being swiped. Silly. And then like, it's heavy. Like, if you go on my TikTok page, you will see that I live in a booting community. Meaning if they can't see 2 stickers, you're getting booted. So they actually monitor it really aggressively. So I just don't really care for a parking situation here. But outside of that, like, cleanliness of the building, I don't really have many issues. The elevator was down for a short stint, but like, nothing like, I don't smell trash in the hallways. The floors are clean. Like, those are the things that if that started to happen, I would be like, anything that would make me embarrassed to invite folks over. And I've had that experience where I've gone to somebody's apartment and they'd be like, oh, excuse the smell, like it smells really bad. I would be like, stop inviting people. Move. I would never pay full rent and the hallway smell of trash. But that's me. So yeah, going back. So on the front end, they're usually really clear about the concessions that they offer, right? In Atlanta right now, for 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, they're like 6 weeks. 6 weeks free. And then like they'll say something like, but then they'll add in all of these amenity fees. I never pay amenity fees. So whatever you're offering to me as a concession, I consider that a baseline. So when I moved in here, I was basically like, okay, 6 weeks concession, love that, but I'm not paying for the one-time $100 amenity fee. Scratch that. They were like, okay. I'm not paying for the application fee, which was like $400. I'm not paying that. And if I do pay it, so what she said was, oh, Sasha, pay it, and then we'll credit it back to your account for your first month rent. Either way, I'm fine. Like, I could do that on the front end, don't mind. But again, I'm getting a credit somewhere. What else did I negotiate? One of the things that I wish I would have negotiated is parking here is $50. What I didn't know is that parking, they don't have enough parking spaces. So there's always an overflow. And so I really could have negotiated, like, I don't want to pay the $50 per month because my schedule doesn't align for me ever to get a space in our actual parking deck. I'm always going to be an overflow. So I'm essentially paying to be an overflow. That's silly, right? Am I going to go back and ask? Yeah, for this round, I'm basically like, really what I'm going to do is I officially re-signed my lease the March. And then I'm going to wait till April and basically go back down there and complain and be like, listen, every night I'm parking at overflow. I don't want to pay $50. And we'll see. But the hardest thing about negotiation is having the is talking yourself up to actually ask. A lot of people don't ask. They're like, oh, no. I've had a really good concession. Like, the guy moved upstairs for me. We were going back and forth talking. He was like, oh, I didn't know you could answer that because you didn't think about it. You didn't think to ask. And so he's like, oh, I'm going to do that next time. Okay, boy. Did he do it next time? Probably not. But that's why, like, I share. And if you don't action it, you don't action it. So anyway, more recently on the back end, I was getting ready to move from this building because I did want a larger unit. I actually wanted a 2 bedroom, and the 2 bedrooms in this building, they're pretty pricey. And so I was like, if I move, I'll get a 6-week concession and like whatever, like a new area, right? I'll be closer to the city as an example, whatever. So when you're negotiating, you always want to have enough window where you're not doing things at the last minute. So if you know that you're considering staying, but you want to figure out like your talking points, or you want to be able to go back and forth, don't wait until your 1 month notice to then start negotiating. That's not enough time for them to go back and forth with leadership, but also it's a timing thing. So I know at the end of each month, they're doing their numbers, right? Particularly around the end of the quarter, they're trying to figure out how many units do we have that we haven't been able to lease out? How many units do we actually need to, hit whatever our target goals are? If the apartments are not meeting their numbers, which a lot of apartments aren't because there's such a surplus of inventory, that is when you get the most negotiation room. And so I knew my lease was coming up in March. I started the discussion at the beginning of January, where I literally sent an email and said, I will not be renewing my lease. Did I know whether or not I was renewing my lease? No, but I was within the 60-day time frame, which you have to make sure when you're negotiating, you're checking all of the boxes so it doesn't feel like the person on the other end is doing you any favors, right? So say, for example, I decided, I don't want to stay, but I didn't send my 60-day notice. Well, they could easily say, well, Sasha, in theory, you didn't give a 60-day notice, so we're doing that, right? I don't need you to do me any favors, baby. You're not helping me. I'm here to help you. So I sent that, and then I went downstairs and I talked to somebody. That's another thing that's hugely important. Find a point of contact and continue to talk to that person, right? For me, it was one of the ladies in the office that I had, when I signed my lease, she had just started out. So I came back to her and was like, oh no, and you always give, and you get a little. So I complimented the building. I love the building, was really excited to stay here, overall comfortable, but. And you always have to have a but, right? And so my but was parking and the fact that the concierge is not consistent. It's little things, right? It's not anything that they're like, oh, are we really going to be able to convince her to stay? Of course you're going to be able to convince me to stay. It can't be a big thing. That's another negotiation kind of. So I listed out those two things, and she said, well, what will get you to stay? And I said, well, I do want to check out some other units. So I did look at the other units, and she said, like, oh, if you do any of these units, we can definitely give you the 6 weeks concession. Well, this was prior to my job loss. Not that it was a huge deal or that I wouldn't be able to move, but I just didn't want the additional cost of having to move. And like the mental of like, well, now I'm shifting to a larger unit. It's going to be more expensive. Does that make sense right now? And what am I really asking for? I wanted a 2-bedroom for when guests come, but in reality, like, that's not a need. That's like a nice to have. And so I said, I'm going to forego upgrading, because the next time I move, I do want to move where I'm going to live full time. I'm so tired of like, I've moved literally once every 3 years. So your girl's tired. I'm tired. So anyway, we go back and forth on some other potential moves. I decide, okay, I don't really want to move out of my unit. So now they're like, well, Sasha, if you stay, you can't get a concession. Girl, don't tell me what I can't get. So what did I do? I said, actually, if I move, I'm only moving because you guys are not offering me a concession. And I put it in writing. And I said everything that I said to her downstairs in the office, but made it very clear that, like, if you were to offer me the 6-week concession, I would absolutely stay. So what did they do? We went back and forth. It was more so on their side, so it took like an additional, it literally took like a month for them to get sign off. And again, I was following up to say, hey guys, I need a decision by the end of this, in the next 2 weeks, or I need a decision, whatever. So I was staying on there just like I wanted, because I also wanted to give them a time frame, right? Like, if you guys aren't able to get back to me by, and we actually finalized around Valentine's Day. I basically said, like, if you aren't able to give me an answer, and I was able to list out the other units, right? Like, I was like, oh, I could stay in, this one and this one and this one. You got to be educated on what else is in the market. And so I shared that with them, and I was like, and I really love this place. So like, to me, it's it's a win-win for me. Either I stay here and I get the concession, or I go somewhere else and I get this concession. Like, they don't know that for me I'm not rushed, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I got to get down. I'm down to the wire. And I have enough time to plan. Like, I have enough of a runway. So going back to my first point around, like, you're not doing me any favors. So I say all that to say, I negotiated the 6 weeks. I waived the $100 amenity fee. So basically, she's like, you pay it and then we'll credit you. I had another girl. She was like, oh, I hate when they do that because they never credit me. Girl, do you just tell me you don't follow up? Like, get it in writing, which I always do. I literally had her, I remember the last time I signed my lease, they didn't want to write that they weren't going to waive my concession in the notes. And I was like, well, then send me an email. She was like, yeah, we can't put that in lease. I was like, but it needs to be in writing somewhere. And because that was basically a $600, that was like another $600. And so she was like, okay, just send me an email. So I sent her an email and I said, yeah, acknowledge the email. She did. So, and sometimes you don't need acknowledgement. One-way communications also, like, because again, if you send an email and somebody doesn't agree with the email, they should respond. And if they don't, that's also like, I'm the lawyer, but will I hold it? Yes. So I say all that to say, negotiate coming in the door for your apartments, negotiate going out. That works for the Atlanta and a lot of the southern properties. In New York, I definitely didn't have that advantage. When I lived in primarily New York, because it was already so competitive and they didn't have a lot of inventory, it was harder. So market definitely matters, but still try. Even if it's something small, like I live in a community with dogs and they had like a pet fee. I'm not paying a pet fee. I don't have a pet. Waived it. That's $20 a month, but 20 times 12, like, you get the point. It's wherever you feel is a value add. I would say, so we talked about apartment lease. We talked about severance negotiation. Again, when it comes to severance, you can ask for, maybe it's not you want another 2 or 4 weeks of pay. Maybe it's you want it paid out in full and you don't want it allocated over, additional pay periods. Like, all of those things you can talk through. I've actually never salary negotiated on the front end just because I was more junior when I started with my previous firm. And I've been there for 6 years. I negotiated throughout the years, but not at the onset. And that's actually hugely important. If you come in underpaid, it's really hard to catch up. And I didn't realize that until I was actually in the situation and got some transparency from talking to my peers that I wasn't making the same. And that makes a big difference. You have to have enough of a network that you're able to have those conversations, because again, I was kind of riding blind and then had a couple of conversations, then they bumped me up, but I was still never at par. I was never at with my peers, and then I moved markets, so that also played into the narrative of like, oh well, you're not living in a higher cost of living in a city. And so I say all that to say, when you can negotiate at the forefront, because it's always easier. And you know, even if you don't have multiple offers, say you have multiple offers so that you are getting the best deal. And again, if you go in asking for your number, I always caveat, like as I'm going through the interview process now, I ask for my number that I want, and then I say, but of course, I want it to be in line with the individuals who are doing similar work or at my level based on my experience, right? I always leave that caveat, because if I come back and I find out that I'm being paid and it's a discrepancy in my pay, I'm going to make it clear that like one of the things that brought me on was the fact that I was going to be in line with my peers. Hugely important. Hugely important. What else? Another example of negotiation, my friend, actually, this was last year or the year before, I can't remember. He had some water damage in his apartment, and they basically gave him two options. Move out, and you can move out and you don't have to pay to break your lease, or you can move units. And that was it. And he was like, I'm just gonna move. I'm like, this is hella convenient. You have water damage in your unit. You need to ask for the world and see what they landed on. We go back and forth. I used, again, ChatGPT, wrote up a couple of things. And, I got this boy, they paid for his moving expenses. They reimbursed him for a month's rent for the month that the water damage happened. And so they paid his moving fees, which was the cost of the U-Haul and his move-in fee, and then like his application fees for a new unit, and gave him back 1 month's rent. That was a win. And I even asked him, I was like, well, what do you want? And he was just like, oh, I want my stuff to be reimbursed. I'm like, that's insurance. Like, let's not focus on the little things. Like, insurance is going to cover the fact that your laptop got damaged. That's not important. What do you want? What is going to take something from the fact that this is, like, if you feel like something is impacting like your day-to-day, like ask for that. And so he ended up getting it. He was really excited and he ended up moving. But like, again, if you don't ask, you won't know. And that is really the crux of it. Other things that you can negotiate that I didn't really take into consideration is like your credit card interest rate and waiving your annual fee. This was something I recently did. So with Amex, say you've been with Amex Platinum, I call in and just say, oh, I'm getting ready to leave, and they waive the $400 fee. Again, if you don't ask, you don't know. I think I paid that fee twice. And so basically, like every other year, I threaten to leave and then they waive it. I'm going to do that shit this year. One of the things I'm getting ready to do is call my credit cards and negotiate my interest rates and see how I can get that. So, yeah, I've never had to do like medical bills, negotiating them. I heard you can, like if they want to settle. Again, I don't really have that. Service bills, anything like cable, Wi-Fi, I always try to get like the most recent promotion. Like I'll end it and give them a new email address just to create a new account. Like even with HelloFresh, it's not negotiation, but like I got 6 email addresses. I use every one of those. All of my boxes is gonna be $45. I don't pay standard rates. Like that's really what I'm telling y'all. I'm calling it negotiations, but you just need to get really tactful about your money. Stop giving these people your money. I can't really think of anything else that I would deem negotiations. So just in, let me just go ahead and wrap this episode up. In negotiation, think about what you want. Be bold enough to ask for what you want, and most importantly, just like do it. If you know you're not comfortable saying it out loud, write it out in email. If you know you're not comfortable emailing, but you're comfortable saying it, do that. Like just do whatever. I used to say this all the time after college to two of my really good guy friends. I got so comfortable with hearing no. I promise you. Once you get comfortable with rejection, it does not faze you. And so I always just tell them, hey, on the other side of that no is a delayed yes. Have audacity. Get some audacity to just ask for what you want. And if somebody tell you no, also be willing to pull the trigger, right? If you ask for something and they're like, was I willing to move? Yes. Off of principle. Can I pack bags and get out of here? Yeah. And can I get to another unit? Yeah. Like that wasn't a thing. But if you have to be willing to say, okay, if this doesn't go in my favor, like I'm gonna go, or I'm gonna threaten it and build it all the way up to the last month. Like I was willing, going back to my apartment thing, like if they waited until after the 14th to tell me, oh hey Sasha, we're not sure, da 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 da, I was gonna be like, oh, okay, well my notice still stands for not renewing. I would have waited until March 13th to say, oh, in fact I am staying. They can't do anything, right? So like, just get some goal. In 2025, if you don't get nothing else, get Audacity. That's the episode. Until next time.